Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Heather Hirsch. I'm a menopause expert and clinician here in Boston, Massachusetts. And in this week's video, we're going to be discussing how to know if you are in menopause. And it should seemingly be pretty obvious, but if you're watching this video and like many people, it's actually not that easy to tell. Knowing when you went into menopause is really important for a couple of reasons. One, if you want to initiate or discuss hormone replacement therapy, it's helpful to know when your last period was. Two, for your bone health and when to get a bone density. And three, how we define postmenopausal bleeding is by knowing when you went into menopause. So if you want to learn more, stick around. Now, the reason I wanted to do a whole video on this is many people come to see me in the office to either clinically diagnose perimenopause or menopause. And so it's a really common question to ask. We're gonna start with if you're having periods. If you're not having periods, don't worry, we're gonna come to you next. So if you're having periods, there's 3 ways to know that you are in menopause. The first is not having a period in 12 months. Even 9 months doesn't count, 10 months doesn't count. You do have to start the clock over again. Now, it's really important to journal and track this because your periods might change in either color or consistency, clots, no clots, and that can really help a clinician know. So I want you to start journaling and tracking when you're getting your periods, how long they're lasting for, and yes, even the TMI details, like what it looks like, or if you're having any PMS symptoms. Common things tend to be bloating or breast tenderness or insomnia. So note all of that stuff, because if you just had, let's say, dark red bleeding, no PMS symptoms, it lasted a day or two, that may not necessarily be considered a period. It's actually just bleeding. So noting it down can help if you ever get confused. But when in doubt, menopause by the textbook is 12 months of no periods. And any bleeding after that is categorized as postmenopausal bleeding. Now, your last menstrual period is the final one that you have. And really, therefore, menopause is made retrospectively looking backwards because you never know when that period is going to be your last. So be sure to track and journal. There's a couple apps that I like. The Balance app by Louise Newsom is a really great one because you can also track your symptoms in it, like I just mentioned. Or you can actually use many fertility apps, but use them backwards. So there's a lot of things you can do to track when your last menstrual period was. Number 2 is lab work. And the reason that's number 2 and not number 1 is because your period history will always trump your labs. So let me say it again, your periods will always trump your lab work. But let's talk about lab work because this is going to be really important for women who are not currently having periods. So when you're looking at labs, it's a little hard to tell by labs alone if you're in menopause. But typically what you will see by the textbook, and not all women follow the textbook, is a follicle stimulating hormone or FSH level above 35 on more than one occasion. So let me give you some typical numbers here. I often see menopausal women with FSHs of 60, 80, 100. The highest I've seen is probably 150, 160. Is higher or lower, better or worse? No, it really just means that once it's over 35 on more than one occasion, and typically when it starts to get into that upper 80s, 90s, that really signifies menopause. Now your FSH level is going up and up and up and up in your brain, telling your ovaries to secrete estrogen. But if your ovaries are retired, that's why that FSH level is going up, because it's trying to send a louder and louder signal to your ovaries to give your body estrogen. Now, your estrogen level is the second most important lab, and estrogen levels in menopause range between 0 and 20. So yes, some women make a teeny tiny amount of estrogen postmenopausally. But I always say, if I went to the grocery store across the street and said on the loudspeaker, if everyone here could get their labs drawn who's postmenopausal, I would see some levels of 0, 5, 17, 12, and 0 more commonly. So you can have a tiny bit of estrogen postmenopausally. Now, to give you a reference range, when women are cycling, when they're pre and perimenopause, estrogen levels go anywhere between 50 and 450 every single month. So a level between 0 and 20 is pretty much 0. Do you need an LH level to determine menopause? Nope, you really just need that high FSH and that low estrogen on multiple occasions. Do you need a progesterone level, a testosterone level? No and no. Now they can be helpful in sort of looking at your hormonal picture in general, and I often do order them, but it's really to help create a postmenopausal plan for my women who are considering hormone replacement therapy or hormone therapy. So you don't need those to diagnose it. You really just need that FSH and that estrogen. In my world, I also sometimes get an A1C level and a cholesterol level, as well as a TSH level, because I just want to make sure I'm looking at you as a whole. In fact, your cholesterol can rise as you go into menopause. Check out this video here. It got very, very popular as women were noticing and tend to notice that their cholesterol levels increase as their FSH levels increase. All right, so on to number 3, and that is classic symptoms. Now, I'm a hormonal menopause expert, so I think almost everything qualifies as a symptom of menopause, particularly if it's new in the onset of that symptom paralleled those changes in your periods right when you sort of stopped your periods. Those to me are symptoms. So of course the common ones are hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, but there's also things like hair loss, vertigo, burning mouth and burning gums, tingling in your hands and feet. So anything that's new to you that is happening alongside this change in period pattern as you're going through perimenopause into menopause, I consider a classic symptom. Okay, so what if you don't get periods? Well, who are those women who don't get periods? Well, if you've had a hysterectomy and your uterus has been removed, this is you. If you have a Mirena IUD and you don't get periods, if you've had a uterine artery embolization and you don't get periods, or you're taking any kind of birth control or contraception in a way that you don't normally get your periods, if you go back to those 3 things that I use, you can't use number 1. You can't use 12 months of no periods because you're not having periods. So you really have to rely quite heavily on number 2 and number 3. So remember, number 2 was lab work, that high FSH and that low estrogen, and number 3 was those classic symptoms. So be sure, again, I really recommend the Balance app because you're gonna really rely heavily on your symptoms and your lab work to help decide when menopause was. Now, caveat, if you have your ovaries removed and you're no longer having periods, then your menopausal date was the day you had both of your ovaries removed, or if you had them done one at a time, which happens actually quite commonly, then menopause was the date at which the second ovary was removed. And that's because even if one ovary is removed, that other ovary is gonna work really well and take over. All right, so that's how you can tell if you are in menopause. And if you're interested, I have a whole playlist on menopausal symptoms because that's the 3rd thing that you're gonna wanna really, really watch. Thank you guys for watching my channel. I know many of you watch a lot of my videos and haven't subscribed, so please consider doing so. It's free to do. You can always change your mind later. I love growing this community and I'm so thankful for all of you who watch my videos and leave amazing comments. If you found this helpful, not only subscribe, but please share it to a friend or to your social media so that more women can find this channel. I really enjoy doing these for you, and your subscription and those numbers of people watching this channel really motivates me to continue making more for you. You can also find me on all my social media platforms. I'm at Heather Hirsch MD, and I'll see you next week. Bye guys.